when my husband and I relocated after we both finished our training. We moved to the Midwest, and I found the ideal job, like the job that I had set my sights on before I even knew it existed here in the town that we moved to. It had loan repayment. It was politically in line with my beliefs and values. It believed in physiologic birth. It had all the things that I thought I wanted. But then, after the kind of initial 5 to 6 months of like getting acclimated, I did feel like I was, well, quite frankly, I was miserable.
All right. Welcome back, friends, to the Discovering Your Calling podcast. I'm your host, Sherry Miter, and I am so excited to jump into this conversation with Emily Sadri today, because not only do we get to talk about her true calling journey and what she's doing, that, as I just shared with her, as somebody who's about to turn 57, I'm very intrigued by her topic and what she does today. It's much needed in the world. But she's also familiar with her top 5 Clifton strengths. So I'm super jazzed to incorporate that into the conversation today. So welcome to the podcast, Emily. I'm so glad you're here today.
Thank you so much, Sherry. I'm thrilled to be here.
Great. And Emily and I met online in a different group, and she reached out, we connected, and the more I learned a little bit about Emily, the more excited I got to just have you on this show. So tell everybody just a little bit about what you do today, and then we'll go backwards to where you were when you knew you needed to make some sort of change.
Sure. I love that. Yeah. So 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago today, I opened a functional medicine women's hormone practice. I'm a nurse practitioner in my town, Cleveland, Ohio, where I live. That's now really kind of a 50% hybrid brick and mortar and online business. We take care of women, particularly women 35 to 55 is sort of our target area, who are struggling with fatigue, weight gain, brain fog, burnout, all of the things that people typically present to their doctor's office about and get told, like, you're just overweight, or you're just old, or maybe you should try an antidepressant. This is like a very common issue. And we really help women figure out why they're feeling this way. And we don't believe that it's just as a result of, aging, or that something's wrong with your brain. We really think that it's because of hormones and deeper things going on in the body. And so that's what I do.
And I just love that. As somebody who has struggled, I had, endometriosis in my late teens, early 20s. So hormones have just always been a struggle. I'm blessed that I was able to have 3 healthy children, but I did have a hysterectomy very early on. And then it was just that, the doctors just want to put you on the patch. And then it's like, well, try this, try that. And it's always like, let's Band-Aid it instead of figuring out what really is the problem, what's going on here. So, and watching, one of my daughter-in-laws went through infertility, and just so many things that I so applaud you for doing this work. Because it really is, I see where so many women struggle with these issues. And like you said, they just want, oh, well, you're probably, I've been told that before, but are you depressed? Maybe the tired's just because you're depressed.
Yep. Yeah, I think that we also normalize a lot of the things that women experience as they sort of hit 35. Really, there's a lot of hormonal shift and change that happens around age 35, which coincidentally lines up with when a lot of women are done having babies, or maybe they just had a baby. And so that gets kind of convoluted with, is it just postpartum? Is that why you're feeling tired? But there's so much, like, I think about when I was young and I looked at my mom and her friends, and it was like, well, when you're in your 40s, like, you become a little fluffier. You're overweight,
and
and you're cranky, right? Think about the archetype of like the American mother-daughter pair, right? You've got this young daughter who's in menarche for a period of many years, right? That's the coming on of period, and all the hormonal changes that go with that. And then her mother, who's on the other end of the spectrum. And then there's all this collision, right, between these two women, because neither of them really understand what's happening. And they're not putting it in the context of there's this massive physiologic shift. And I really see that that's actually a point of where they can really connect, mother and daughter, if there's awareness, right? If there's awareness of, this is your luteal phase and this is your menstrual phase and this is how you might feel during that time, and seeing it as an opportunity to view life through different colored lenses based on our hormonal shifts rather than something you have to suffer through. And I just have never been a person that will accept things at face value. So, when I struggled with my health and had a lot of issues in my early 20s and chronic sinus infections, IBS, and I just I had, a very classical experience that many people in integrative health have, where I was bounced from provider to provider and put on, or offered medication after medication or intervention after intervention. And no one really told me how to get well. No one really asked me about my diet. Nobody asked me about anything. And I just got more and more disillusioned with the whole process until I was like, this is all fucked. You can bleep that word out if you don't have swearing on your podcast. But I was like, this is so messed up. This cannot be right. And I picked up a random book in Barnes and Noble's written by an integrative physician, and it changed my life. Like I really opened my eyes for the first time. And I don't necessarily specialize in that area now. Really focus on women in this point of transition in life and kind of what hormonally is driving their symptoms. And then, of course, downstream from that, we always work on the gut and inflammation and all the other things that we do in functional medicine. But it's kind of a lost period of time. It's like also prior to really full-blown menopause, this period of transition is kind of ignored. It's like, and it also happens to be a time in life when women are taking on excessive amount. It's that sandwich generation. We're maybe caring for older generation of parents. We're caring for children. We're managing a household. We're probably, either building a career or holding a pretty large career at that point. Many women have kind of excelled and they're leaders in their field. What are we doing to support our physiology so that we can show up in a really big way? Not a lot. There's not like a handbook for that.
Right. And I would imagine you probably get a lot of people that blame the fatigue, the symptoms they see as I'm just overworked. It's just my life right now. It's just the stage. Yeah. So
and not just that, but that they glamorize that. Like, we totally glamorize like, oh, she's just, how many times have you heard, like, she just has such a big heart. She's such a giver. She always shows up. She always works overtime. She always like signs up to bring a meal. And it's like, let's not mention the fact that like she looks harried and exhausted, and like no one's talking about that. But then if it's the person who on the flip side is like highly investing in her health, getting weekly massages, seeing a Reiki healing person, seeing a functional medicine person, and like people are like, she's obsessed with her health, like she's so vain, or like she, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so high maintenance.
Yeah, and that's like high maintenance is a bad thing. Like, but I really see it as like the more that you invest in yourself, the more you have to give.
Absolutely.
And so we're in this period of time in our life when we're expected to give at such a high level to both sides, right? The older generation, the younger generation, our partners, our career. How do we do that if we don't fill? You have to fill up that tank.
Right.
So that's really the motivation for what I do. And then on the other side, I just love the science, and I love figuring out problems and kind of putting together, crafty solutions for people that are at their wits' end.
Right. Which is a really good segue to get into your talent themes.
I love that.
Yeah. So, and I want to back up a little bit though, because I do want to, because again, this podcast is all about finding your true calling. And a lot of times our calling comes from a challenge we've had, which you already shared. That was where you were. So take us back. Let's go back there a little bit. When, right before you went to Barnes and Noble and found the book, like what was happening?
Okay, so the Barnes and Noble
you
book
professionally?
I was like 22 at that time.
Yeah,
I was not in medicine at all when I found that book. So
okay,
that was like maybe a planting of the seed. It got me interested.
All right.
So the fast forward many years later, I actually had an undergraduate degree in musical theater. I had I have an acting major from New York University. And I realized pretty quickly after I graduated that I wasn't actually interested in being a professional performer. Not the lifestyle, not the auditions, not the travel, just none of it it felt destabilizing to me and sort of my personality. And so I, got interested I was teaching yoga to moms and babies, actually, and music to moms and babies. And I got really interested in that maternal infant kind of connection and in the birth of motherhood, like what happens to a woman when she becomes a mother. And so I literally woke up one morning and was like, I think I want to be a midwife. And I tend to be non-conventional about the way that I choose things. At the time, I didn't know that you had to become a nurse first. I didn't know anything. I just kind of got this feeling and knew I had to pursue it. And you did have to become a nurse first. And so within 3 months, I was enrolled in nursing school. And I ended up, just loving being back in academia after a few years break from college. I loved the science side after having been in a fine arts degree program, and, loved being a student. And then went on to grad school at University of Pennsylvania for midwifery and women's health. And, I'm an all-in kind of student. So when I'm doing something, especially that you're investing so heavy, I was like, I get so all into the thing, like the container they prepare you for. Right. I think a lot of people can relate to this. It's like you go to business school and like they kind of offer you, the options are like, you can work for this firm, you can work for this big company, you can have this kind of role, you can have this kind of role. And like they might talk a little bit about entrepreneurship in business school, I guess. I mean, I've never been to business school, I'm just guessing. But this is my experience in midwifery school. It was like you could join this kind of practice, or you could do this kind of thing in public health, or you could join this kind of practice. And, from that mini buffet that I was offered, I kind of decided what kind of practice I wanted to join. And then when my husband and I relocated after we both finished our training, we moved to the Midwest, and I found the ideal job, like the job that I had set my sights on before I even knew it existed here in the town that we moved to. It had loan repayment. It was politically in line with my beliefs and values. It believed in physiologic birth. It had all the things that I thought I wanted. But then, after the kind of initial 5 to 6 months of like getting acclimated, I did feel like I was, well, quite frankly, I was miserable. There's not really a better way to say it. I just, and this is layered with the fact that when you're a midwife, you're up at all hours of the night. I was, 1 in 4 midwives in the practice, which meant I was on call 25% of the time. I was running off to the hospital. It was very hard on my nervous system. It was very hard on my hormonal system, right? Because it was just so much stress, because it required stress. Like if you're going to act quickly in an emergency, you have to be able to respond to emergencies. And that was a skill that I had, but it also drained me significantly. And I really felt the toll that it took on my health. I had a baby while I was doing this. So I was really just like so many women, I think in their late 30s, early 40s, I was just pushing, like with everything that I had, and pushing and pushing and pushing, and not having even any time to sit back and reflect and recover, until something felt like it was really breaking. And so then fast forward almost 5 years in, COVID happened. I was pregnant with my 4th baby. And I took some time out of the clinic and out of the hospital just for kind of, the whole team's concern about my health and being pregnant while the pandemic was at its height. And I really liked working from home. I really liked seeing patients virtually. And I was like I felt like my energy was so protected in that space. I just really felt like this feels better. I don't feel as drained. I felt like my pregnancy was healthier. And a few months before that, we had a day-long retreat as a midwife group with a local woman who did use the Clifton Strengths in her practice. She was a coach. And we had all done this assessment. And I really enjoyed doing it. And then we all got our printout, and then we all like wrote on big white pieces of paper on the wall our strengths, and we kind of grouped them together. And I can see the idea of like doing, a kind of business training, right? To see in a team who has what strengths and like where to use people. But it was like I had this moment, you have these moments where like time freezes. And I was like, I don't have any of the same strengths as the people I work with. Like they were all empaths, and they were all, all about relationships. And while I've always considered myself very empathic, and I'm a highly sensitive person, and I really feel for the people I care for, it also takes a lot out of me. So like being in a healing space every day and seeing, 20 to 70 patients a week was like very much depleting my tank. Whereas some people, I think that truly does fuel them and they don't get depleted. And I wanted to cry right there in that room, like how this is why I feel kind of like a black sheep here. Like I'm so in love with the work that we do, but the actual work of it, like what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, feels so out of alignment for me. And I had this realization. So my number one strength is woo, which, is winning others over, which I learned. And I thought, oh, that makes so much sense. Like, yeah, I love that. I probably would have been good in sales, that would, if I'd chosen a different career. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Just a few months prior to that, our director had set up a meeting. We would frequently get donors for our practice because it was a nonprofit organization. And there had been a big potential donor, and she had chosen another midwife to go with her to meet this donor, to talk to them. And at the time, I had never been so like upset about anything. I was like, why would she not ask me to do that? Like, that's literally would be my favorite thing. Like, I loved to talk about our mission. I loved to engage other people in what we were doing. But I didn't really know why it upset me so much until I realized like, I'm not being seen for my strengths.
Yeah.
That's where we're out of alignment here. Like, I'm not, and I'm not being utilized in my team. Like, I'm being expected, all of my productivity, all my reimbursement, my paycheck is coming from doing this thing that of course I'm good at, because I'm just good at lots of things, probably like most of the people you talk to. Like, I'm good at stuff. I like to be a high achiever. I like to get an A. But the things that I'm actually gifted in, where I'm offering something very unique, because many people can show up and see 70 patients a week. But the thing where I'm really unique, I'm just literally doing none of it. And that's why I feel empty inside.
I didn't
know how to rectify it. At the time I was like, I worked so hard to get here, and there's not a lot of jobs there's not a lot of jobs where I can be a midwife. And I really self-identified with that. That was my identity, that in that profession, you really feel that identity. And it took COVID happening and me getting quiet. So I often will say to people who are wondering about leaving midwifery or leaving something, like, I don't think I would have been able to figure out what I needed to do next if I hadn't had the space to get quiet. And so I do think that in some cases, people may need to leave their job, or may need to stop or go part-time, or like go on sabbatical or travel for 3 weeks or whatever it is, to get quiet enough to say, like, please show me what the next thing is. I'm like a big believer in fate and destiny, and the path is sort of already laid if you open your eyes to it, if you can see it. And so at some point in there, I was pregnant, I was planning maternity leave, and I still, like I tell you, I knew at that time that was not right. And I had known, right? It was right before COVID that I found we'd done that Clifton Strengths, and then COVID happened, and I'm still sitting with like, there's an unrest. I know there's something different. What is it? And of course, you go to the obvious things. You think like, is that job better for me? Is this job better for me? Like, I was still thinking small though. I was like, maybe this practice or this. And then I was about to have my baby. I had my baby, still kept my jobs. I did not quit my job until 48 hours before I was supposed to go back from maternity leave. Because my head just kept saying to myself, like, why would you leave? This is a great job. You have a great job. You have great benefits, blah, blah, blah. And then, but I couldn't fight it any longer. Like that feeling, even though I didn't know what was next, which is a very scary thing for high achievers to say, I'm going to do nothing.
Yeah, because intellectually, it doesn't make sense, right?
Makes no sense.
It makes no sense to walk away from something that's good.
Yep. Especially without, like, I didn't even have a plan. Like, if I had a plan,
right,
even if it wasn't going to pay me, that might have helped, but I didn't.
Right.
I just knew in that moment that like I would be crushed. Like I was going to get sick. it was not going to be good if I went back. Mm-hmm. So I quit, and then things really escalated. And it was sort of right after the next New Year. So in 2021, that I was like, I'm just going to open a practice. I'm just going to do it on my own.
I see your activator coming through in so many things that just like you get activators, just they get an idea and they act on it, and we'll figure it out along the way. We'll just figure it out along the way. We don't need to know all the details, right?
100%. And that's exactly what I did. And that's what I continue to do in my business. I didn't know what I was going to do, but what I learned was you don't have to know. You just need to know what the next best step is. So for me, it was like, okay, I know I need a backup physician in the state of Ohio. I got to work that out. I know I need a lawyer. I know I need an LLC. I know I need insurance. Like, it was just, let me just do these basic steps. And then, okay, what am I going to offer? I don't need a space. I can do virtual. I can go to people's homes. Like I just got creative. And once I had the things in place that made me feel like I had stability, I could then do the next thing. And so that's what I did.
Emily, I love so much your story, and there's so many things in there. And I got to see if I can like remember now to go back and pick out the pieces that I really want if somebody's listening to this to hear. One, and we're going to dive deeper into strengths in a minute, I do promise. But knowing your natural gifts, like you said, to know your natural gifts and talents and realize, wait, skills. And I'm in the middle of a group program that with my Discovering Your Calling students, and we're actually just finished up a skill phase and the strengths phase. And skills are totally different than your strengths. We can learn, if you're smart and intelligent, you can learn how to do so many things.
Yep.
But that's not your gifts.
Exactly. And like I had been, I'd been through an Ivy League advanced degree program, right? Mm-hmm. So I knew how to take a history really well. I knew how to be a medical provider. I knew all of those things really well, but my gifts were what allowed me to connect with humans and to like promote my business and to jump into action, right? From idea to action quickly and to problem solve. That was one that I was like, oh, that makes sense. I never thought about that, but I loved that piece of functional medicine, which is like taking 10 different independent things and saying, how are these all connected? And where did they begin in this person's timeline and in their story? And how do I go about treating them in a way, I loved that part a lot. And I like that part about traditional medicine too. Right. So it's really, but if you get stuck in this, needing to have the skills, I never would have started because, and initially I even thought like I was reaching out to other providers in the area who were doing kind of similar work to me saying, can I mentor with you? I'll work for free. I'll mop your floor. Like I never should have said that. I'm a highly educated person, but I really truly just wanted to like be mentored by someone because I didn't believe that I could do it myself. And thank goodness nobody responded to me. Nobody took me up on the offer. Because it was, I just had I had to trust that I would figure out the skills as I went.
Right.
And I still am. I still am, learning those things every day.
Right. Because what's more important is using your talents and your gifts, because when you can use your talents and gifts, the skills were going to come and you're going to be so much more successful and a heck of a lot happier when you do that.
Yep. Especially if you function with integrity. Like I think if you come to everything with integrity, you're going to know when your skills aren't up to the job and when you need to work on something and learn something. And I think that's been an important grounding force for me throughout all of this. It's like, I may not know, and I'll be very honest with people if I don't know, what the next step is, or if I need to take more time to research something. And I use my gifts to show me where I need to go to refine my skills so that I can do the work that I love better.
Right. The other thing too that I want to just point out that you said, and then we're going to jump into the talent themes a little deeper, but is the fact that you had to get quiet and, society forced you to with COVID and everything. But that is such a vital piece because as we started off saying, especially as women, we are so busy being busy and doing all the things. We don't stop to really think, am I happy? Am I even just happy doing this? And, it is taking that pause. And I think that's why so many people did start looking for that next thing during COVID, because so many people were forced to take a pause. But this evolution was happening way before that for most people. The unhappiness was there. It just, we could hide it. You could easily hide it.
And I think that we overinvest ourselves in what we can do. Like it's the, thing where my mother-in-law comes over and she just constantly cleans. It's like better than just like sitting and, actually thinking how you feel. So it's like, we all do that. We all keep ourselves engaged in the action because then we think we're doing something, even if like spiritually we're stunted, and we're locked. As long as I'm moving forward, if I'm like getting accolades at work or I'm accomplishing something, or for me, it was like checking off to-dos, closing charts, ordering things, like and there were always tasks. So it makes you feel like you're having forward momentum, even if you're totally stuck and broken, and uncomfortable. So that forced quiet, although uncomfortable, I think is a necessary piece, to just create openness and reception, a position of receptivity to, what is lying ahead of us.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And if that's an uncomfortable thing, that's to do, if you're listening and like, I don't even know how to be quiet. It's like, sometimes it's maybe go for a walk, start there, but leave the phone at home.
100%.
Leave the earbuds at home. Just go for a walk. Totally. Go walk in nature is great. So if you have to be active, or if you feel like you need to clean, then again, turn off the TV. Maybe a little background music's okay, but give yourself time to think. Don't be plugged into something all the time.
So, one thing that I love and I encourage clients to do too is like go book a tiny house in the woods for 48 hours. Like most people can find a way to negotiate getting away from their life for 48 hours. Right. Find something that doesn't have Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Just bring some hardcover books and a journal, and just force yourself to spend some time and just see what comes up. And you may not get answers, but you may actually find, the reality of what your internal experience is that you've been avoiding.
Right. Get to the bottom of it. Because, and I see this with most of my clients, they don't know what's next. But they know something needs to change and they don't know what. And for those with like you, so actually, let me go back. So Emily's, if you're familiar with Clifton Strengths, and we'll explain what they are as we go through, but so her top 5 are woo, communication, activator, restorative, and futuristic. So we mentioned a little bit on activator, and activators are willing to just jump in and try. Like I said, they don't need all the information. So if you're high activator, yes. Oh, well, every talent theme has a down, not downside necessarily, but a
pitfall,
pitfall. Yeah. I can't think of the word Gallup uses for it right off the top of my head, but it's a cautionary thing. They all have them. Things we have to be wary of that could turn that talent theme into a weakness. But it's the beautiful thing that allows you, Emily, to just, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm just going to start. And that motion of starting is what opens the next door.
Absolutely.
If you don't start.
It takes trust, right? You just trust that then the next thing to do will be revealed to you. I mean, I've started a couple of programs that way where I said, I don't know how it's all going to work out. And I know it would be nice if it was really buttoned up and neat and perfect and easily delivered and everything was automated. But I don't even know what the needs would be of the people until I just do it. So let's just do it messy the first time. And then as we go, we'll make notes along. And that's our building for the next time,
Right. I'm the queen of beta. I'm the queen of launching beta courses, because it's like, if I call it a beta, we're all figuring it out along the way. So it takes that need to have everything, like you said, buttoned up in perfection, mentality away, because it's a beta course. I don't need to know it. So we're all figuring it out. So
exactly.
Yeah. I love that.
And then the woo, that surprised me. I didn't know that. I would have thought that it was relational, but it's not. It's there's something else there, where I can, I'm able to kind of, I think, especially in a one-on-one setting, tap into what's really going on for the person and speak to that. So it's sort of like a different variation of empathy is kind of how I see it. Being able to speak to someone's desires and see that, listen, really be an active listener, and then be able to respond to them by meeting their needs and also showing them the way forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Woo is an interesting talent theme because they all, again, show up dependent on how your other themes show up.
Interesting.
So there are some people that are high woo. I have a friend. It's actually, one of my husband's really good friends. So we spend a lot of time together, and he has high woo, but his is more this almost boisterous, loud, charismatic. We go out to dinner with him, and he's always got to stop at 2 other tables to talk to people he knows. Everybody and their brother know him.
Yeah.
So his is connecting with multiple people. And that's how woo can show up. But then there is this other woo, which I have a feeling is more your woo, that it's able to win others over by connecting, and the energy level's the same, and that connection's there, so that you're able to help them connect with building trust.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And also show them, I think, like what they're already saying, but reflect it back to them in a way that they can see themselves more clearly.
Yeah. And that's communication playing in there, which is your next theme. Total, that's 100% communication. So communication is able, that's the gift of communicators, is they're able to take not just their own words and share them in a way that people understand them better. Great storytellers, you probably, do you use a lot of like analogies to explain something?
All the time, especially complex functional medicine like concepts. I'm really good at breaking those down and making people really be able to internalize them and relate to them.
Right. And then communication too, I could see where is probably so vital in your practice is communicators are also good at taking what somebody else is trying to say, but they're like, they can't get the words out. Communicators can have that ability to take what somebody else wants to say and reflect it back to them. So again,
and I love doing that. Like when you say that, I'm like, yeah, I love that. Like that's like, I love doing that, and I was great at that as a midwife, that's why people like to see me in the office, because you feel heard and seen when someone can do that for you. You don't have the words or the language or the way to express it, and someone can do that for you. You just feel so heard and seen. I think so many women don't feel that way, feel kind of very unseen. Right. In terms of their struggles.
Right. And that's why, like you were saying earlier, that a lot of the other women had, or men, had high empathy and relator. And so they're able to do that in a different way, but both ways makes that patient feel heard no matter what.
Absolutely. And they were wonderful at what they did. Like we were all really good at serving our people. It was just that I think that there was something in that difference where it fatigued me to not be able to use like all of my gifts. Like there were so many things I had ideas about, like the practice, like we could, we would do so much better with marketing in this way, or we could do this in Instagram. And like, if it was turned down, it was like,
right.
I felt so unfulfilled, because there were things that I wanted to do, but that wasn't what I was hired to do, which is fine. It's not their fault. It's just I was fulfilling a job that I wasn't the right fit for that position.
Right. Right. And that's, now I'm hearing your restorative there, because restorative loves to fix problems. They're the problem solver. So of course, if you're seeing that, our marketing kind of sucks, we should do this. This is how we can fix it. And a lot of times restorative, you see problems before somebody else even knows there's a problem. Like you're already thinking of solutions, and other people have no idea there's even a problem. So sounds like that was happening a lot too for you.
Yes, all the time. And that really speaks to being in a system that's entirely broken. The medical system is so broken for providers, broken for staff, broken for patients. Like there's not a person listening to this podcast, or you yourself, I'm sure, who hasn't had an incredibly frustrating experience in the medical field. Like just trying to get a hold of a doctor, trying to get an answer, trying to get an appointment, all of those things. And so just having to live in a broken system where it was like, couldn't we just do it better if we did this? Just simplified, was incredibly frustrating, and was definitely a core value coming into my own practice. It was like, I want to take out so much of that stress and difficulty that patients experience because it's actually impeding their healing. And can we just take all of that out, make everything easy for people so that they can just focus on getting well? Like that the trauma around all that interaction is actually hurting them. Can we take that piece out and kind of reinvent the wheel a little bit? And, we're seeing that. Like there's a big push from sort of tech and different industries to come into health and say, like, how can we rethink this? Because it's clearly not working, right? We spend more money in the US than any other nation in the world on healthcare, yet we have some of the sickest population. We have some of the worst outcomes in childbirth, yet we spend more money than any of our counterparts. Our outcomes are on par with some developing nations. I'm learning now, partly because of what you're sharing with me, reflecting back, what I think my experience was as someone who really liked to fix things. When I saw that something was so broken and I could see the impact of that brokenness on myself and on my clients, it's really hard to be stuck in something that's broken and not be given the power or be endowed with any utility to fix it. Right. To just have to sit there in the brokenness and show up and do your job and smile. That was too painful for me. And now I see why. At the time I didn't have the language for it, but understanding that that's a skill of mine, every step of the way in creating my own practice has been, how can we make this more fluid for people? How can we undo, the difficulty that people experience in the medical system when they interact with us in our practice, so that whole aspect is just not there, so that they can just focus on getting well, and that, the experience is different, and I think that there is a lot of movement in, the tech world in California. There's a lot of interest in like rethinking the medical model, because we're just so broken compared to our counterparts. And, you could spend a whole billion podcasts talking about all of that. We don't need to go into that, but it's definitely a place that's in need of solutions, dire need of solutions. And for me, because I couldn't fix it, I needed to just create my own thing.
I love that. And if somebody's high restorative and you're seeing all these problems, and it's totally not in your job title to fix them, that would be so frustrating. So I could see where that piece,
I would say, demoralizing.
It is. It would be. It would totally be. And I'm sure you went home not having any idea, why does this even bother me?
Yep. 100%. Like, why can't I just focus? Like, I felt like my colleagues could just focus on, like, I really felt like they truly meant it when they said, like, I just show up and I take care of the people I take care of, and I love what I do because I see that, I'm doing good work. And I could resonate and understand that, but I just couldn't shake these other feelings that I had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because your restorative was not. And that's what happens when we get unsatisfied, or again, drains you. When you go home and you're just frustrated and feeling like you're not heard, is because our talents they're not in a space where they can flourish.
100%.
Yeah. And on restorative, so I imagine too, that not only are you creating the way to help clients have a better answer to their medical problems, but how does restorative help you just even dive into? Because again, restorative loves problems. They're like the detective.
Yeah.
So how does that reflect in how, if you have a patient and they come to you with this problem, how do you see your restorative showing up then?
I mean, it's sort of everything. Like that's essentially my whole clinical brain, right? Is that I look at a woman and I say, you might think that we're just going to kind of relieve a few symptoms, but I'm actually hoping to get you to optimal, like to where you feel just so much better than you ever thought you could. And what are all of the things that are getting in the way of that? And of course, there's some, psycho-emotional piece to that, but then there's just a lot of really simple things like how their body chemistry is working, what some of their genetic predispositions are, what foods are most optimal for them. It's all the little pieces, and then figuring out how do I communicate those in a nice, easy to understand package to the person. But then the ultimate satisfaction comes when you see a total transformation in a human. And they sit before you. I had a patient yesterday who's been with me for a year, and she just sat before me like a completely transformed person. And it was funny. We had almost nothing to say to each other in that visit. It was just, we just kind of sat in gratitude, and I'm going to cry. It was just so satisfying, so deeply satisfying. And it reminded me of the feeling that I loved as a midwife of walking someone through an entire pregnancy and then seeing them at a 6-week postpartum visit, having come all the way through, like we got them through it, and we created a new person in that process because they grew and they changed and they met their deepest strengths. And I feel like that's what women need in their health journey. Like they need it to be intensive and, relationship based and partnership based, but they also just need freaking creative solutions. Like they need something better than like take magnesium and,
right.
Don't quai. Like those are just not like we are so complex as humans. We're so intricately made that we need intricate, complex solutions, and they really do work. And that's where I feel like there's a little bit of divine intervention too, because, I of course am like so steeped in the evidence and love to learn and love to read and love that. But there's also a little bit of like intuition that I let breathe through my work, which is, obviously deeply satisfying.
Right. And I feel like when you are truly living in I call it your calling, where you are utilizing your natural talents that, I believe God put inside of you and what he created you for, that gets you in, again, that space and that atmosphere that your intuition is now allowed to have the space to work more freely than when we're stuck in the box.
Yes. And I think I got this message when I was in my medical training that like, you follow the algorithms, you follow the evidence, because otherwise it's just willy-nilly and you can't make stuff up. But you, in a way, you become like disconnected from that intuition. But the gift of midwifery was that we were always taught to really see people as whole humans and to care and to breathe life into that care and love. And I think by maintaining that and knowing that that was a high ideal, even when I was in clinical medicine, it allowed me to keep that part of myself alive. And now I would say to people who are worried about, well, if I just go based on my intuition, like, who knows what I'm going to do with myself all day long, I would say that, like, if you follow your heart, like, we're all, like, to echo you, I really do believe that, like, we are all placed here with a very specific intention. And if you're doing that and you're following that every day, like, you will know what things you actually need to do, what skills, what kind of more concrete things. And then you get these moments. It's not like every moment of every day I'm just living in this like bliss.
Oh no. Yeah. I wish,
it's
right?
Hard, right? It's like you're putting one foot in front of the other, you're slogging through. It's hard. And then you have these beautiful moments where the sky opens up and you're like, yes, this is why I'm here. And then you keep going, right? And then, like, you say goodbye and you move on and you put your foot in front of the other again. And then you get these little reminders occasionally, like, you are fully living in alignment right now. Just don't forget that, because tomorrow there may be a really big challenge and you want to stay connected to that reminder. You want to stay connected to that purpose.
So beautifully said, Emily. So beautifully said. And then the last thing I just want to touch on, which you already kind of, again, it's so fun for me to have these conversations. Like I'm in my joy spot today just because I can, like, oh, there's that, I can pick those out. But you're futuristic, is that visionary, futuristic. We're the visionaries. And I say it's my number one theme. So I can say we, but that paired with your restorative is like so much. And again, it's come up in how you've rephrased things back, because vision, futuristic, you can see the better path. You can see the better product. You can see the possibilities that your clients, your patients can have, and then help them. Now going back to your communication, help them see what's possible for them when they do these things, when you let your restorative figure out the problem, they implement it so that they can have that place where you had with your patient of just 1 year later. And,
that's so cool, Sherry. I've never heard them connected that way. I feel like this is such a gift to hear that. That's like amazing.
Yeah.
I'd say, like, being an entrepreneur, I got some pretty good strengths.
And doing what you're doing, Emily, because to be able to paint that, because especially, again, going back, like a woman, that's frustrated, that's, had the bad medical experience and she's doubtful and like, I don't know if this is going to work. You can help her see what's possible. Yeah.
And I think I always hold that vision, like, with me all the time. When I step into a room with someone, like, I'm holding their future vision in me, so that I can, because I'm just acting as if that's already going to happen. And that, I think my assurance in that helps them to feel like that's possible.
Right. Because a lot of people can't see the future in anything. I'm learning that. Because again, I'm high futuristic. It's like, what, you don't see that? Like, you can't dream, like, what? But they can't in any, whether it's their health, their well-being, what they're going to do, their calling, anything. They just have a hard time really allowing themselves to dream. Maybe it goes back to that, like we talked about, not giving space and quiet to do it. But a lot of times it's just their talent theme zone and they don't have futuristic. It's low for them. Yeah. So to have somebody be able to step in and really paint the picture for them, that's such a gift that you can give them the possibilities. And this is what what can happen if you stick with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see that for sure. But I also really see it in terms of like growing my company.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Which is
for yourself.
super fun. Yeah, which is so fun because I never pictured myself as an entrepreneur in any way. I just saw myself as I liked all the other pieces. And now I'm finding the longer that I'm in it, that's actually the thing that I love like the most.
Nice.
It's just so cool. And some of that means being able to share my vision and my model with other people so that they can do it in a way that I do it, so that it's not only 35 people I can help at once, right? It's like we can extend and help more people.
Yes.
Which is really exciting,
Right. So as we wrap things up here, Emily, if somebody's listening and they're thinking, all right, yeah, I know I'm not using my talents. I don't even know what my talents are, but I'm pretty sure based on this conversation, I'm not using them at work. Mm-hmm. What would you tell that person that's in that frustration of feeling like even that moment you felt like when your boss didn't bring you to speak to that person, to the donor?
I don't think they got the money, by the way.
No, see, they should have brought you. They would have
100%. They would have gotten more money than you.
You would have won that person over and painted the vision for what it was going to do for
her loss. Right. Totally.
So, but what would you say to that woman? But she's scared. She's like, but I don't even know. I don't know what I would do. What do you say to her?
I would say that the answers are 100% there if you can get quiet enough to find them. And an answer is not a whole blueprint, right? An answer is not it's not a Google map from here to the destination. The answer is like one thing of what to do next. And so the one thing might be like, what do I love? Like, where do I get that warm feeling in my chest when I'm doing something? What maybe one aspect of my job do I like or did I love in the past? And it might not be like if you loved something about painting, so it might not be painting that's going to be your next thing, but what was it about painting? What was it that sparked in you when you were doing it? That is the thing that lights you up. Can you create that experience a little bit more for yourself so you can refine your vision a little bit? And then of course it doesn't hurt. I mean, I had no idea what the Clifton Strengths were until I did this one day experience. I think that that's an awesome place to start, to have some information like that. I also love human design. And having my human design done was also really eye-opening in terms of, what kind of person I was. I'm a generator, learning some of the pitfalls of that and kind of how to utilize that. So there's so many tools out there. Just start on the path to self-discovery and you will discover the thing. But you just have to keep saying yes to the things that feel good and stop with the people pleasing. Stop with the have tos. Like the more that you do that and that you're like going against the thing that feels good, you're walking away. You're walking down the other path. And so I know that's I think where it can be especially scary for women is not like, I remember when I was looking for a backup physician, I called up this one guy. He talked my ear off. He was like totally, so masculine and so like all about himself. He talked my ear off for half an hour. And then he was like, I'd love to help you. Why don't you come work for me? And then you can have a little side thing. And the people pleaser in me wanted to be like, oh, sure, that sounds great. Right. Because he's like a pretty accomplished person. But I felt the feeling. I was like, I don't think I should do that. And in the moment I was so wrapped up because I think that's part of being woo too, is you get really in the conversation and like the communication, like I'm really there with someone. And I was like, I can't see why this is wrong, but I can feel it. Like lots of people would say this is probably a great thing to do. It's safe, right? He's offering you a job, Emily. You don't freaking have a job. He already has a whole business. Like just go work there. But I was like, no, I'm not interested in that. And I got off the phone and like hot tears on my face. Like, what did I just do? I just turned somebody down. I don't have a lot of options here. But then the next thing came because I made space for it, because I followed my guide and I did not people please in that moment, no matter how tempting it was.
Such great advice. So thank you. And I think that's just, we'll wrap up here. So anything else? I know you're working on, you have a handout support for women.
Yeah. So if you're curious a little bit more about kind of what I actually do, and kind of how, I'm sure if you're a budding entrepreneur or you're a woman over the age of 35, if you're interested in sort of how I help people and some of the techniques that I use from a functional medicine perspective, we have a guide for you that kind of explains my methodology. That's free. It's like a 30-page guide. So we will have that on the landing page linked in Sherry's show notes, I'm imagining, right, Sherry?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So anything else that we didn't get to that you want to say before we finish things up?
No, I mean, I think this is so amazing. I think the work that you do is amazing. The know thyself is such a useful thing to always come back to. When you're feeling confused, just remember that like you can't know there's no person you can know better than yourself. You spend all your time with yourself. So when you're lost, remember that, come back to yourself and you will find the way.
I love that. It's one of the reasons my whole, like the navigational, the compass rose is like my symbol for everything. It really is. And to me, that represents your talent themes, because when you are, I say that to my, in my groups and stuff a lot, that when you are lost, just come back to your talents. They won't steer you wrong. They never steer you wrong. So yeah.
Right.
Beautiful.
We're all born with like all that information right there.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, we'll have all the details in the show notes. Emily, like I said, I knew this was going to be a fun, powerful conversation with your woo, communicator, futuristic, restorative, and activator in there. And it did not disappoint. So I hope anybody listening, you found value in this conversation and enjoyed it as much as I did having it with Emily.
Thank you so much, Sherry.
Thank you.